worldly person or someone of not of the Jehovah Witness faith cannot really talk to a heavily indoctrinated Jehovah Witness. You cannot really reason with them on any level. That's why on YouTube I see these other videos of street preachers, the Christendom personnel going up against a JW, and they are trying to debate a JW, but it's really not going anywhere. It just flattens out, and they chalk that up as a victory of some sort. You were pretty much ignored all the way, and whatever you said has gone down the toilet, because they have a defense mechanism to avoid that confrontation, that train of thought, and it just goes in through one ear and out the other. I hate to say that you're wasting your time talking to a JW, because you are not talking to the person. You are talking to the JW brain. That JW brain is so heavily fortified with a large wall against the world that it's almost impenetrable. The only way you could really get through that, if ever, is to take out the foundation of it. And it's hard for them to get to listen to you to pick apart the foundation. So you cannot appeal to the person or the JW brain. In my experience, I guess you have to appeal to their heart, their the basic human element left of that person. But if you're going to go up against a JW, right off the bat, you have an impenetrable wall to try to scale to get to that person. It seems from their dogma and all the meetings that I've attended and conventions and not much assemblies, but all those big get-togethers they have, even with the social sort of settings like picnics and little parties here and there and get-togethers that they have, it seems to me, from my observation, that it all evolves around a persecution complex. I mean, they think everybody's against them. The whole world is against that little group alone. You guys got nothing on the Jews. They are the ones that are the most persecuted group of people in the world, in my humble opinion. The JWs, actually, I think in general the world thinks of the JW, or maybe the people in power, let's say, politicians and what, and you have your own little world, your own little corner, you don't bother anybody, you are no concern to us. So in reality, in my opinion, in world politics, you guys are not even on the map as far as persecution from people. So a couple of stories involving my wife and how I seen that JW brain switch from normal person that I fell in love with, the person that I fell in love with, to the JW brain that flipped on over. For instance, early on in our relationship, there was this singer-songwriter, John Denver. He died in a plane crash. And it wasn't big news, but I mentioned it to my wife. We were talking about things, and that subject brought up. It's like, oh, guess who died? John Denver. And out of the blue, she was like, ha, good for him. And that took me aback, because, John Denver is like beloved by everyone. He's like the sweetest guy out there, I guess, or, and I called her out on it. And it's like, why are you willing, bad things on John Denver? He just died. And she went along, and she explained to me that she said that he was against the Jehovah Witnesses publicly, and just spread a lot of rumors about them and this and that. So years later, that's always stuck in my head. And so years later, I looked up on the internet that about that, and it was an urban legend that John Denver went on stage and said to the crowd, "Whoever's a Jehovah Witness, you are not wanted here. Leave." And that was the end of it. Not much other information. I haven't checked since then because it's really silly for me to do that. I mean, I don't care really. But that was the reason why that she reacted in such a hostile manner to John Denver, out of all people. A second incident of her snapping from, a regular human being to a JW Brain persona is there was this one time I asked her to see this video about this pedophile, a really notorious, infamous pedophile that was associated with the JW organization. And this guy, we actually knew him. Go figure. We know a pedophile. I actually met the guy. This particular pedophile was notorious, infamous, and he's still at large, as a matter of fact. They haven't caught him yet. But I think he was a ministerial servant, very, very well respected in the JW community, in his congregation around there. So he had access to many children and molested and raped countless number of children and manipulated them into, being hush-hush. You know the deal. I will destroy your family if you ever tell anybody. That sort of deal. One victim came forward, and then the rest of them came forward, and before the authorities were able to catch him or go any further, he fled. He's gone. He's probably somewhere out there somewhere in another congregation. But his story was on YouTube. And one day, this is when I noted about the Australian Royal Commission and the cover-up practices of the JW organization. So I'm slowly feeding that information, not the whole thing yet, I'm just little doses of information about that to my wife, starting with this pedophile that's on the streets. So the plan was, I forwarded a link to her Facebook page of this person, but alongside it, right on the right side of the YouTube, she goes there and she's watching the video and she's engaged on the video. She knows about it and she's looking at the video. So the video is over, and then it was on YouTube. So it had the automatic play the next video on a queue of suggested videos. The next very video was something awful like the bed practices or the bedroom rules of Jehovah Witnesses. I think a lot of you guys seen that. I've seen that. I think it's stupid. It's not true, at least from my point of view. But that came on, and that sort of sensationalism and sort of reinforcement of the typical stereotype of JWs, she saw that and she shut down completely. She's like, we don't have no bedroom rules. And she shut the video down instantly. I mean, within seconds, and moved on with her day. Right then and there, I seen firsthand on how quick that JW Brain came over and shut, that sort of sensationalized, over the top sort of in your face hostility towards the JW. It prompted her to put her defenses up completely and shut it down. So that was the first clue to me that I shouldn't be too aggressive with my wife. I should easily go into these subjects and not appeal to the JW Brain, but to appeal to her heart. That is my strategy. Something that's near and dear us both is our children. So that's why I'm going through that angle of things, of the children and the pedophiles and the multitudes of predators in that particular community. Just like the Catholics, I guess, back in the day. Probably still so now. But that told me I should tread lightly with her, not to push too hard or be too aggressive. I've been getting some advice on the comments on my other videos about that particular subject of talking to her, and the thing is, one person in particular suggested that I show her these publications from the Watchtower that contradicts their dogma and whatnot. I can't really use that route because that would put me out of character. I mean, we've been married for a long, long time, and I never talked dogma with her, except how silly some of the rules are and you know, the obvious opposing on some of their policies, and I would give my point of view. And it's sort of on the policy level, you know, real world situation, except the biblical, you know, Jesus did this, and, you know, Jesus did that, and God said this. Not at that level, but sort of on a, you know, real life, you know, practical, pragmatic level. So in that context, I can't just jump out of the blue with Watchtower articles highlighted my point of view, or tell her to read that and see and discuss the issues using that form, because it's severely out of character with me, and she will smell a rat right off the bat. Her guard will go up instantly with me and start sort of putting the wall up against me and be suspicious. Other suggestions from the comments say that I should be a bit more stern with her, like say that, listen, the kids, these are my kids too, and we're going to do things my way. And we're going to celebrate Christmas here on the house, and I want the American flag out in my yard. That sort of approach. And I can tell you that that's not going to work with my wife at all. No, I'm not a wimp. But that will also be out of character for me, and she will pick up on that. I've heard from another video, I don't remember when, the processes of a freshly person going into a study, not a JW yet, how they're indoctrinated into thinking that the world is against them. It starts off really early. Like, if a woman wants to be a JW or is studying, a few lessons into their study, they would say that, listen, our organization, the JWs, we're special. There's a lot of people against us. We are persecuted worldwide because we are, you know, God's chosen one or whatever. And they would say things like, your family and your friends will probably that doesn't understand this will be against you studying with the JWs, so expect that. And this is how you should counteract that opposing point of view from your family and friends, especially spouses. That sort of indoctrination is hit upon them very early on in their indoctrination when their studies. My wife, she was born into it, so she heard it from when she was, you know, very small, growing on up, where all her social networks and friends and family are JWs, so she's in that JW bubble, isolated from the real workings of the world, and how, you know, just regular everyday people are, you know, just the same as they are, but a bit more accepting and not as paranoid. Me putting on the strong arm on her is very out of character for me, so she will pick up on that, and the walls will go up. And what I mean by the walls is she will look at me as being opposed to her religion. That would be out of character for me to, you know, talk dogma with her and be sort of stern. So she's going to take that as being Satan's influence on my psyche. That's the Hail Mary of the JWs. A rational person, you know, dogging on a JW would be the only reason why that person is doing it because he's possessed by the devil or demons. And I kid you not, that is part of their persecution complex on explaining why, you know, so many people are against their sort of brand of cultism, if you will. So I have to play my cards really careful. For me, it's all about hearts and minds. I have to appeal to her heart to get to her mind. So with the age of the internet and all these, stories coming out, the true stories of what the JW organization is all about, exposure out there from real JWs leaving the organization and telling their horror stories, it's a big eye-opener for me, even though I've been around in association with JWs for almost 2 decades. I'm really getting the nuts and bolts of how they operate, and that is an advantage for me to use against the JW organization's stranglehold on my family. So this is a sort of advice given to me as a young kid living in the big city, and it's really bad advice, but it was advice nonetheless, and I think it applies in this situation to the T. This person pretty much explained it like this. Listen, you have to use the system to screw the system. Basically, in a nutshell, that's what it was. You need to use their dogma to go against their dogma. You have to let them do their oppressive tactics to shed light on their abuses on their flock. And unfortunately, I'm letting the organization prove that point. For instance, the pedophile phenomenon with the JWs these days and all these lawsuits. I have a vested interest in that because I have young ones, children, that could be exposed to that if I don't prepare them enough to identify that particular threat. And also make a presence out there saying that, hey, I'm a hands-on dad. You mess around with my children, there's going to be repercussions. And I'm not going to the elders. I'm going straight to the abuser and the authorities. This one statement that rings true is they have to have their own Armageddon. So that is pretty much the tactic that I'm using. It's kind of like the what I've said about addicts. They have to hit rock bottom to start over and begin again in their lives, where the JWs have to have their Armageddon. So there are many underlying issues that my wife is experiencing now that is helping my cause, I believe. For one, it's a divided household as far as dogma. I don't do family worship or family study that the JWs do. That is not done here. I don't go to all the meetings. Neither do my children. My wife, she doesn't go too often. She has anxiety sort of issues too, so she doesn't like being in that public too much. So that's helping my cause with that. I think the congregation, I don't believe she's been marked yet, and I'll explain in another video what that is. It's a new concept to me too, but I think she's like unofficially marked, where the congregation themselves, the practitioners there, took it among themselves to judge my wife as being not a good enough JW or strong enough JW to be associated with. And then in this sort of conservative area, yeah, they play those games around here. And I think my in-laws got a little bit of something to do with that too. They are JW social climbers, and they will put anybody under the bus for them to get that extra step higher in the JW hierarchy. That is no lie. And they've done it before with other siblings. That is what's going against my wife. You see, the JW organization and their policies is setting her up for failure with unofficial marking of my wife, the treatment pretty much from the congregation because I am worldly. She doesn't get invited to much of the social events, and all sorts of little petty high school drama there, which it sort of reminds me of that. So I got that going for me as far as my activism against my wife being in, or my children and my wife being in the JW organization. So I'm not being the bad guy here whatsoever. The JW organization is, but my job is to sort of point out and make her notice the abuses of that particular scenario around her, including the bigger picture things with her children not protected by the organization because of the two witness rule and all that other policy that hurts the practitioners rather than protects them. And there's a host of other little things too that could help out as well. So that is the standpoint that I'm taking. For me, it's hearts and minds, and I got nothing but time to hone that sort of message to her in such a way that is spoon-fed to her very gently, so that JW brain won't notice and shut me down when presented with these, subjects to her. It's a fine balance. It's walking on eggshells, but it's the strategy that is working for me. Considering that I've heard of other strategies on YouTube with other ex-JWs, trying to get their family out and going the direct approach and this approach, and it just winded up them getting disfellowship and their spouse or mate putting up that wall. And once the elders get note of it or wind of it, they're going to suggest that particular person, draw up divorce papers and alike. So I think there's a lot of stories out that had that ending, which I'm trying to prevent.